I live in the house I designed, paid for, and built from the ground up. But every dinner, I eat alone at the corner of the kitchen plastic plate, bent fork, while my son lounges in the living room, feet on the table, calling me a burden. I don't argue. I just quietly put on my jacket and drive strangers around for tips. My name is Margaret Hayes. Most people just call me Maggie. For 32 years, I worked as a school district accountant in Aurora, Colorado. I managed budgets bigger than most people's mortgages. But when I retired at 62, my life shrank down to the kitchen corner of the house I built. I bought this lot in 1994 with a $30,000 down payment from my teaching pension. Frank, my husband, was working construction at the time. And while he hammered the beams, I handled the loans, the contracts, the paperwork. Every brick of this 2-story colonial was signed, sealed, and stressed over by me. We raised our son Josh here, had birthdays here, buried a dog and planted a tree in the backyard. And now I'm treated like a long-term guest. Frank spends most of his time on the recliner, remote in one hand, beer in the other. Josh moved back in 2 years ago with his wife, Kelly, after they needed space to figure things out. That was supposed to be temporary. It's been 27 months. I gave them the master bedroom. I thought it was the kind thing to do. Now they act like I've overstayed my welcome. They eat dinner at the main table, laughing over takeout and cocktails. I eat 15 feet away, on a folding chair by the pantry, with mismatched plastic cutlery, pretending not to hear when they turn the volume up on the TV. Once, I suggested we all sit down together for a Sunday lunch, like we used to. Josh rolled his eyes. Mom, you don't have to make everything weird. That was the end of that. These days, I don't say much. I wake up early, sweep the front porch, make my own tea, and when the air gets too thick with silence or sideways glances, I grab my keys, pull up the Uber app, and drive. It's easier to take care of strangers. At least they say thank you. It started small. Frank began locking the liquor cabinet not because I drank, but just in case company came over. Josh installed a digital thermostat and set the house to 68 degrees. Too hot wastes energy, he said, as I sat shivering under a throw blanket, fingers stiff from the chill. Kelly started using phrases like, "We need space," and "this is our home too now," even though her name wasn't on the deed or the bills. Then came the calendar. Kelly taped it to the fridge, a big whiteboard with color-coded notes for everyone in the house except me. Doctor's appointments for Josh, yoga for Kelly, poker night for Frank. My section was blank. Not even a Margaret grocery run, as if I had stopped existing in time. Meals became more formal, for them. Frank would grill steak. Kelly would make salads. Josh would pour wine. I wasn't invited. If I made soup or pasta, no one touched it. They'd order Thai food instead and leave the dishes for me to clean up. Once, I came home from a drive and found my lasagna untouched on the counter cold, drying out under the foil. No note, no explanation. That night, I ate it alone in the garage, sitting on an overturned milk crate. Josh caught me one morning folding laundry in the living room and said, "Mom, can you not go through our stuff? It's kind of invasive." It was his t-shirt, mixed in with the towels. I didn't respond. Instead, I started doing my own laundry at 6 a.m. Before anyone woke up. I stopped baking banana bread. I stopped asking how everyone's day went. I stopped saying goodnight. I began moving quieter, like a ghost that wasn't sure she still belonged. And then came the night I found the email thread between Frank and a real estate broker. Subject: transferring house title, son involved. I read it twice. That was the moment I knew. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were getting ready to erase me. 2 days after I read the email, I pretended nothing had changed. I made eggs for myself, cleaned the upstairs bathroom, drove 3 Uber rides before noon. I even stopped at the farmer's market and bought fresh peaches, Frank's favorite. Old habits die slower than people's loyalty, I guess. That evening, the house was buzzing with activity. Josh had friends over loud, bearded men who called me ma'am and asked if I was the cleaning lady. Kelly offered them drinks while I stood in the kitchen, ignored, slicing peaches into a bowl no one would eat from. Then I overheard it. Josh, laughing in the living room. "Yeah, Dad's signing over the title next week. It's just paperwork once it's done. We can finally refinance and make the nursery." Nursery. I stood frozen. That room, my sewing room, the one with the windows I picked for the morning sun. That was the nursery now. I stepped into the hallway and stared at them. Frank caught my eye, then looked away. He said nothing. No one said anything. I went back into the kitchen and rinsed the peaches under cold water, even though they were already clean. Later that night, I asked Frank, "You're transferring the house." He sighed. Didn't meet my eyes. "It's just for the bank," he mumbled. "Josh and Kelly need equity to qualify for the baby. You know, the future." "The future," I repeated. "And me," he shrugged. "You'll always be taken care of." That's when I realized taken care of was just another way of saying put somewhere convenient. That night, I didn't sleep in my bed. I sat in the laundry room, surrounded by fabric softener and broken promises, wondering how long I'd been living in a house where no one planned to make space for me anymore. And I knew if I didn't act now, there'd be nothing left of me in these walls, not even a name on the deed. I didn't confront Frank. I didn't scream, cry, or threaten. Instead, I opened the filing cabinet in the garage and pulled out the manila folders I hadn't touched in years. Mortgage records, property tax bills, the original purchase agreement with both our names, my bank statements showing decades of payments, receipts for the kitchen remodel I paid for in cash, the flood insurance I renewed every year. I laid them out on the dining table at 3 a.m. like a battlefield map. Then I bought a lockbox, small, black, fireproof. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a crime show. But I needed a place to put my proof. Not for them. For me. The next morning, I drove straight to a UPS store and opened a P.O. box under my name. Frank didn't need to know. Neither did Josh. From now on, anything that mattered came to me and me alone. I opened a new checking account at a credit union across town, transferred my pension payments, changed my Amazon delivery address, set up digital receipts to go straight to a private email I hadn't used since 2009. It felt exhilarating, like reclaiming a part of myself I'd boxed up and labeled irrelevant. I started tutoring again, virtual sessions, just a few hours a week. Algebra, financial literacy, SAT prep. The kids didn't know I was 64. They just knew I showed up on time and explained things better than YouTube. My first $200 check came in the mail 2 weeks later. I didn't spend it. I folded it neatly and placed it in the lockbox on top of the deed copy and my wedding ring, which I'd quietly removed that morning while folding laundry. That evening, Josh laughed at something on TV and yelled, "Mom, can you grab snacks?" I looked at him and smiled. In a minute, but I never went. Instead, I walked outside and stood in the backyard, watching the house I built glow warm behind me. They still thought I was small, quiet, easy to move around. But I had just started building something they couldn't see, and it wasn't a nursery. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the envelope arrived. I found it wedged in the mailbox under a coupon booklet, thin, official, and addressed to Franklin and Margaret Hayes from a title services firm in Denver. That's what made me pause, the fact that my name was still on it. I opened it right there by the curb. Inside, a cover letter, a title transfer draft, and a list of required signatories. Josh's name was already typed under recipient. The co-signature lines were blank, mine included. It wasn't just for refinancing. They were transferring the house. No one had told me, not even a warning, not even a half-hearted explanation. I walked back inside slowly, the papers trembling in my hands like a silent alarm. The house looked the same, but something in it had shifted, or maybe it had always been this way, and I just refused to see it. That night, Frank grilled steaks in the backyard. Josh and Kelly opened a bottle of wine. Laughter filled the air. I microwaved soup, sat in the kitchen corner, and stared at the title transfer like it was divorce papers I hadn't been asked to sign yet. Frank never mentioned the envelope. Later, when everyone was asleep, I opened my laptop and called Linda, my old friend from the school district, now working at the Arapahoe County Clerk's office. "Hey, Maggie," she said, voice warm but tired. "Everything all right?" "Not really," I said. "I need to know if there's been any ownership change filed on our property." 1060 Red Elm Drive. I heard typing, then a long pause. "There's a pending title reassignment submitted last week," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Still under review, but it's flagged as a full ownership transfer to Joshua Hayes." My throat clenched. Without my signature. Frank listed himself as sole owner. Claims the house was inherited prior to marriage. I sat in stunned silence. "That's a lie." Linda exhaled sharply. "Yeah, it's also fraud. Do you need a referral to someone legal?" "I already know who I'm calling," I said. "Thank you, Linda." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat on the laundry room floor, surrounded by towels, bleach, and betrayal. My name erased from my own life. I stared at the vent in the ceiling, wondering how long they'd been planning it. Weeks, months. By morning, I had a legal pad full of notes. Call a real estate attorney. Print every bank statement from 1994 to 2002. Get a certified copy of the original deed. Cancel all auto payments connected to joint accounts. Buy a second lockbox. I wore slacks and a navy blazer I hadn't touched since retirement. Kelly looked at me over her coffee mug and raised an eyebrow. "Big plans today." "Just errands," I said calmly. Josh didn't look up from his phone. At 10 a.m., I sat across from Angela Wells, a sharp, efficient real estate attorney in downtown Denver who looked like she didn't have time for excuses. Her office smelled like lemon disinfectant and steel. I laid everything out. The deed, the mortgage slips, the receipts with my signature on every page. I even brought an old photo of me standing next to the excavator during the foundation pour in 1995. Angela flipped through the papers slowly, her brow tightening with each new page. She finally closed the folder and looked me dead in the eye. "They're trying to cut you out completely." she said. And if you let this go, they'll succeed. This isn't an oversight, it's a strategy. I nodded. Then I want to make sure they regret it. Angela leaned back, smiled just slightly. Let's make sure they never saw it coming. It didn't take long for them to notice the shift. By the end of the week, I had stopped washing their laundry. I didn't clean up the dishes they left in the sink. I didn't refill the paper towels or pick up Josh's dry cleaning. I moved my belongings from the basement laundry closet to the upstairs guest room and closed the door behind me. No one said anything the first 2 days. Then Frank cornered me while I was trimming the hedges out front. "What's with the attitude lately?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual, but I could hear the tightness behind it. "I'm just creating some space," I replied. "You seem to think I needed it." He blinked, then scoffed. "Don't get dramatic." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That night, I tried to log into our joint checking account, access denied. The bank app returned an unauthorized user error. My name was still listed on the account, but I couldn't view transactions, make transfers, or even see the balance. I called the bank the next morning. "Yes, ma'am," the representative said carefully. "Online access for your profile has been disabled by another account holder. I would need to appear in person with Frank to reinstate access." I didn't bother. Instead, I moved the rest of my pension into the credit union account I had opened weeks before. I rerouted all incoming payments, canceled subscriptions linked to joint cards, and signed up for a budgeting app under a new email. 2 days later, I woke up to a 63-degree thermostat and a locked snack drawer in the fridge. Kelly's reason: we're trying to stay healthy. The guest room I had claimed was suddenly needed for her sister, who was visiting for the weekend. My suitcase had been placed outside the door. No one knocked. No one asked. Inside was a yellow Post-it note. "Mom, this just makes more sense for everyone. Hope you understand." I didn't tear it in half. I burned it in the fireplace that night. Frank's words grew sharper. He no longer looked at me during dinner. If he did speak, it was through passive-aggressive barbs like, "Guess some people just like to complicate things." You'd think after all these years, you'd want to make life easier for your own son. Maybe it's time to talk about assisted living. That might be better for you and for the baby. The baby. As if that unborn child had more ownership in this house than I did. One afternoon, Josh stood outside the garage while I was unloading groceries I had paid for. He crossed his arms and said, "Mom, we've been really patient, but this tension, it's affecting everything. You're turning this house toxic." I stared at him. "Toxic? You know what I mean?" "Kelly's stressed. Dad's fed up. The baby doesn't need this kind of energy." "The baby. Again. I see," I said calmly. "So what do you want? For me to just vanish?" Josh shrugged. "I think we all need to think about long-term solutions for everyone's peace." That night, I drove until midnight, parked in a Target parking lot, and watched the empty carts roll across the asphalt. I thought about how easy it would be to just disappear, start over somewhere far away, let them rot in the house they stole. But I didn't vanish. I met with Angela the next day. She listened without interrupting as I laid out everything: the revoked access, the financial games, the Cold War of silence. "This is more than real estate now," she said quietly. "They're isolating you. It's textbook coercion. If they push harder, I'll draft an emergency motion." That night, when I returned home, the basement mattress had been flipped upright and leaned against the wall. My bedding was gone. A folded stack of baby clothes sat where my pillows used to be. Kelly looked up and smiled like it was all perfectly normal. "We're setting up the nursery. Hope that's okay." I didn't respond. I just walked into the garage and slept in my car. But in the dark, I smiled to myself. They thought I was being erased, but I was already writing the final chapter. And this time, it would be mine alone. I couldn't keep sleeping in my car. The cold was creeping into my joints, and the ache in my lower back reminded me I wasn't 35 anymore. So I found refuge at the public library. During the day, I'd park in the back lot, wash my face in the restroom, and sit at the corner table by the electrical outlet. I wore the same blazer every day and carried a canvas bag full of files, receipts, and quiet fury. Angela had given me one instruction: pull everything tied to the house ownership records, refinance history, liens, utilities, even HOA correspondences, anywhere your name was once present and now isn't. So I did. I dug through county records online, paid for certified copies, requested scanned versions of archived title changes. It felt like reassembling a shredded map of my own life. And then I found it. In a refinance package from 3 years ago, right around the time I'd been hospitalized for gallbladder surgery, was a document I had never seen. A temporary power of attorney. Frank had filed it in my name while I was under general anesthesia. It allowed him to act in the financial interest of the household and included a sneaky clause buried 3 paragraphs deep. Authorization to adjust asset ownership structure for financial optimization. Angela read it twice, then leaned back in her chair. "This is dangerous," she said. "It's legally shaky, but enough to let him remove your name from certain filings if the lender didn't ask too many questions." I swallowed hard. He forged my authority while I was unconscious. She nodded. And likely used it to make major changes. We launched a lien search that same afternoon. The results hit like a hammer. 18 months ago, Frank had taken out a second mortgage on the house. Amount, $250, 000. Purpose, business development capital. Lender, a private equity-backed bank notorious for approving risky debt. Borrower, Franklin Hayes, sole applicant. No mention of me. Angela looked stunned. This explains why they're so desperate to transfer the house to Josh. If Frank dies or defaults, this place is toast. They're using your name as collateral while trying to write you out of the ending. I took the printed documents home, placed them on the dining table during breakfast. Frank walked in, saw them, and stopped mid-step. He stared for a second, then poured his coffee without saying a word. Josh came down a few minutes later. He glanced at the paperwork, then turned pale. Where did you get those? Public records, I replied, stirring my tea. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said, voice rising. No, I said, locking eyes with him. You made it harder when you decided I didn't matter. That night, Kelly approached me in the hallway outside the basement. You could ruin everything. You know, the baby, this family. We're trying to build a future here. And I'm trying to protect my past, I said calmly. She rolled her eyes. You're bitter. You just want control. I leaned forward, lowered my voice to a whisper. I built this house with my bare hands and a broken back, and I'll burn it down before I let you steal it. For the first time, she looked afraid of me. And I wasn't finished. The next morning, Angela filed our first motion, a legal petition to freeze all property transactions under dispute of fraud and misrepresentation. By the time the documents were served, the locks on silence had turned. Nothing in this house could be sold. Nothing could be transferred. Nothing could be taken without my consent. They had tried to erase me quietly. Now the silence was mine and it had teeth. The motion Angela filed worked like a legal landmine. Within 72 hours, the house was under a formal freeze order. The second mortgage couldn't be leveraged further. The title couldn't be altered. Any attempt to refinance or transfer ownership would now trigger an alert at the county clerk's office. They didn't know I was capable of this. That's what I counted on. Angela leaned in over her legal pad, tapping her pen. You've frozen the fire. Now we prep the flamethrower. Quietly. So we built the plan. First, I filed a formal ownership contribution claim. It documented every major expense I had ever made on the house utility bills. Property tax receipts, check stubs from the original down payment, and my name on the primary mortgage for the first 12 years. We even found an old contractor's invoice addressed to me for the backyard retaining wall. I remembered every inch of that project. I dug half of it myself. Angela compiled it all into what she called a property contribution ledger, the kind of evidence that makes judges pause and husbands sweat. Next, we filed a motion of discovery to compel Frank to disclose the full terms of his second mortgage. That included loan documents, payment schedules, and communications with the lender. If he failed to comply, the court could subpoena his financial records. Angela smiled grimly. Let's see how much courage he has when the court's the one asking questions. But that wasn't enough. I wanted more than defense, I wanted independence. So I created a trust, a living, revocable trust in my own name. Into it, I moved the remainder of my pension, all tutoring income, and a modest inheritance from my mother's estate assets that Frank had never touched. Never even asked about. Within a week, I had complete financial separation, quiet, legal, untouchable. Then came the letters, one to the HOA, advising them that no architectural or ownership change requests should be processed without my consent. One to the original mortgage lender, requesting a formal investigation into signature discrepancies dating back 5 years. And one to Frank. His letter was short. You taught me that silence is survival, but now I've learned silence can also be strategy. Hope you're ready for what happens next. I slipped it under his whiskey glass one evening while he watched TV. That night, they held a family meeting in the living room. I wasn't invited, but I stood just above them on the stairwell, quiet as a shadow. Josh, she's going nuclear. She wants the house, the money, everything. Kelly, she's making us look like monsters. Frank didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, she's not bluffing. She's got the documents. The freeze order is real. Josh exhaled sharply. So what? We give up, Frank sighed. No, we wait and pray she doesn't take it public. But it was too late for that. The next morning, I met Nora, a former student I used to tutor in accounting. She was now a journalist at the Denver Independent, covering real estate fraud and elder financial abuse. We met off the record. I brought redacted documents, refinance schedules, title transfers, the shady power of attorney. She didn't say much, just listened, took notes, and finally said, "You know how many women I talk to who don't have proof? You've got receipts, signatures, dates. This is gold." I nodded. I'm not looking to embarrass them yet, but I want leverage. and I want options. Nora nodded. You've got both. As we parted, she handed me her card. If they push you again, you push back. Call me. That night, I stood at the kitchen sink washing a single cup. Frank walked by but didn't meet my eyes. For the first time in years. I didn't care. They thought I was rebuilding my pride. But I was rebuilding my power, and they wouldn't even see it coming. They pushed again. It came in the form of a letter taped to my bedroom door. Not from a lawyer. Not from Frank. From Josh. Typed. Signed. Cold. Dear Mom, given the increasing tension in the house and the effect it's having on Kelly and the baby, we believe it would be best for you to relocate temporarily. We're happy to assist with moving costs and will ensure you have access to your things. Please vacate the guest room by the end of next week. Josh. There was no please take care, no we'll talk. Just a deadline and an offer to help me pack my life into boxes. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it in half and slipped it into my purse. 2 hours later, I called Nora. You ready? She asked, her voice sharper than usual. I am. 2 days later, the article went live. When family tries to steal your house. The silent epidemic of legal betrayal. The headline sat above a photo of my hands holding the deed to the house, my name underlined in red. The story wasn't just about me. It was about 1,000 women like me. Mothers, widows, ex-wives, quiet caretakers turned legal ghosts. Nora included everything. The forged power of attorney, the second mortgage, the freeze order, and their attempt to evict me under the guise of family harmony. The closing quote was mine. They forgot whose name built the foundation they stand on. By noon, the comment section had exploded. Women. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Sharing stories of being erased, outmaneuvered, cast aside. My inbox filled with messages some kind, some raw, you're telling my story. This happened to my aunt. Thank you for not staying quiet. Then came the ripple effects. The HOA president emailed me directly. We were unaware of the situation. Margaret, please know you have our support. The lender behind Frank's second mortgage left a voicemail asking for verification of loan disclosures. The message ended with, we are reviewing the file for inconsistencies. Inside the house, the silence turned acidic. Josh stopped speaking to me entirely. Kelly slammed cabinet doors and whispered phone calls in the hallway. I caught fragments like unfair, slander, and we need a lawyer. Frank retreated. He stopped coming down for breakfast. For dinner, at night, I heard the creak of the floorboards in his office, but never the sound of his voice. And I wasn't done. Angela filed our second motion this time, a petition for partition, citing financial coercion and unrecoverable trust breakdown. The motion would force either a buyout or the sale of the home. With the market still strong, the court was likely to approve. But we didn't stop there. We added a request for forensic audit of the second mortgage. Where did the $250,000 go? The answer, not business, not repairs, not family. We uncovered credit card charges to casinos in Blackhawk, recurring Amazon purchases under Kelly's name, and a $7,000 golf club membership renewal. Angela compiled everything into an exhibit folder labeled personal gain. That's when Frank's lawyer called. He wanted a deal, his offer. I would receive 65% of the sale proceeds. Frank and Josh would vacate the house within 30 days. In exchange, I'd agree not to pursue fraud charges or file a formal complaint against the lender. Angela turned to me after the call. Do you want to settle? I nodded. On one condition. We added a clause. Frank and Josh would submit a written apology, entered into public court record, stating that I had been a co-owner of the property, primary contributor to its value, and that I had been wrongfully excluded from financial decisions. They signed. The house sold 3 months later for $980. 000. My share. $637. 000. I used a portion to buy a quiet 2-bedroom home in Estes Park. The porch wrapped around the front like an embrace. The kitchen faced the mountains. There was a maple tree out back older than any of my regrets. When the wire transfer cleared, I sat alone in my car outside the bank and cried. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped losing. Closing day arrived quietly. The house felt like a museum that morning, sterile, silent, full of objects no one wanted to claim. I walked the halls once more, not to mourn but to mark the ending. The dent in the stair rail from Josh's toy truck. The cracked tile in the foyer Frank never replaced. The faded wallpaper I picked in 2004, still clinging behind a bookcase we never moved. I didn't touch anything. I didn't straighten or clean. It wasn't mine to fix anymore. Angela pulled up at 9:45 a.m. sharp. She stepped out in a gray pantsuit, holding a folder and 2 cups of coffee. Frank signed early this morning, she said, handing me one. Dropped the keys with the buyer's agent. No issues. And Josh? I asked. Angela raised a brow. He left sometime last night. Neighbor saw him load a duffel bag into his car and drive off. Didn't say a word. Somehow, I was relieved. No goodbyes meant no guilt, no chance to wound or be wounded again. We entered the house together for the final walkthrough. The new buyers, a young couple with a toddler, were due to arrive in an hour. I had left a note for them on the counter, handwritten, warm, impersonal. Welcome home. May this house give you peace and joy. Take care of the garden, it blooms better if you talk to it. Angela lingered in the living room. You sure you want to be here when they come? I need to finish it myself, I said. Clean cuts heal better. She nodded and left with a small wave, closing the front door behind her. I stood in the center of the room for a long time, letting silence settle. My breath echoed in the emptiness. There was no trace of shouting, no residue of cold dinners, no shadow of the past clinging to the walls. It was just space. Then I heard gravel crunching outside. A familiar sound, one I'd learned to brace for. I opened the door and found Frank standing at the bottom of the steps. Older, smaller than I remembered, holding a manila envelope and a grocery bag. He didn't look up right away. I left some tax forms in the upstairs drawer, he said. Go ahead, I replied, stepping aside. He walked past me slowly, like someone crossing a sacred line. It took him no more than 3 minutes. When he returned, he lingered at the doorway. The place looks different, he said, glancing around. Quieter. I said nothing. His eyes flicked toward mine, but only for a second. So, you're really moving up to Estes Park? I already did, I said. He nodded, almost impressed. Josh blames me, says I shouldn't have dragged him into everything. He's not wrong, Frank sighed. I thought I could control it. I thought if we handled it quickly, quietly, it wouldn't hurt anyone. You didn't want it to hurt you, I said. You didn't think twice about me. A long pause. Then, I read your quote in the article. I meant every word. He looked down, fidgeting with the envelope. I used to think being the breadwinner meant I was the builder. But you built this place. You made it a home, and we treated you like a guest in it. You treated me like a ghost. He swallowed. You were always stronger than me. I just didn't know how to say that without resenting it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth had already been written on deeds, in court transcripts, across every bruise on my trust. He stepped off the porch, turned once more. I hope you find peace up there. I held his gaze. I already did. He walked away without another word. When I closed the door behind him, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like punctuation. The chapter was over, and I was still here. It had been 3 weeks since I walked away from the house and everything in it. Estes Park wasn't just a new address. It was a reset button. The air smelled different pine needles and wood smoke. My porch faced east, and each morning I'd sit with my coffee as the sun cut through the fog over the mountains. I volunteered at the library on Thursdays and taught GED prep at the community center twice a week. I planted lavender in the yard, hung a wind chime outside the kitchen window, and for the first time in over a decade, I went to bed each night without locking the door from the inside. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived. No return address, just Mom and Josh's handwriting messier than I remembered. Inside, a single-page letter and a photo. The letter read, Mom, I've rewritten this 5 times. None of it feels like enough. You didn't deserve what we did. I thought I was protecting our family. But really, I was just protecting the version of it that made me feel safe. We used your silence as permission, then punished you for raising your voice. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I finally see you, and I'm sorry. I hope Estes brings you peace. Love, Josh. The photo was of the house, our old house blanketed in snow, the porch light casting a soft halo in the flurries. I ran my thumb over the edge of the paper. Then I sat at the kitchen table and stared out the window until the coffee went cold. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry, just still. A few days later, someone rang the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Kelly stood there. No makeup, eyes tired. Her coat zipped too high, like armor. I'm not here to argue, she said before I could speak. I needed to see you. I stepped aside. She didn't come in. Instead, she handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver baby rattle and a note. We named her Margaret. I blinked. Kelly's voice trembled. She was born last Tuesday. Josh said it was only right. I held the rattle in my palm. It was delicate, engraved with a date and a middle name. Grace. She's healthy, I asked. Kelly nodded. Perfect lungs. Already screams like a rebel. We both laughed briefly, unexpectedly, then silence. I closed the box and looked up. Thank you for telling me. Kelly nodded slowly. We've got a long way to go, but we want to do better. I didn't say anything more. There were no hugs, no dramatic music, no promises. Just a quiet moment, 2 women standing on the edge of something fragile and new. Some reparations don't arrive wrapped in fanfare. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a name, and sometimes that's enough to begin again. Spring came late to Estes Park. The snow clung stubbornly to the ridgelines into late April, as if the mountains themselves weren't quite ready to let go of the weight they'd carried all winter. I understood that feeling. Some mornings, I woke up thinking I was still back in that house, still waiting for footsteps to pound down the hall, for voices raised over breakfast, for the ache in my chest that came from being invisible in a place I helped build. But then the smell of pine and wood smoke would pull me back to the present. I spent those mornings wrapped in a blanket, sitting on the porch with a chipped mug of black coffee and a stubborn squirrel darting across the fence line. The quiet wasn't loneliness, it was grace. And one particular Tuesday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I baked a pie. Not for a birthday, not for a holiday, not because someone asked, just because I wanted to. The smell of cinnamon and warm apple filled the small kitchen. Curling into corners like old laughter, I stood at the counter, elbows resting against cool laminate, and realized no one was coming home. There would be no judging eyes, no cold silences, no tension stretched over the dinner table like tight wire. There was just me, and I was enough. Later that day, I walked into town. It was market day, colorful stalls, jam jars lined in rows, local artists selling prints of mountains I could see with my own eyes. I bought honey from a woman named Marcia, who wore a sun hat with fabric sunflowers stitched along the brim. She gave me a discount because that smile looks like it finally remembered how to exist. I smiled again, just to prove her right. On the way home, I stopped by the bookstore and picked up a paperback I didn't need. It was a story about a woman who sailed solo across the Pacific. I didn't plan to sail anywhere, but I understood the current that carried her. When I got home, there was a single envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, carefully written. Inside, a photograph. A baby, no more than a week old, swaddled in a yellow blanket, her eyes barely open, fists curled under her chin. On the back of the photo, in Kelly's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 simple words. She smiled today. No apology, no request, just a moment shared across silence. I placed the photo on my kitchen shelf, beside the old wind-up clock that no longer worked. I didn't frame it. I didn't text back. I didn't need to. That night, I stood in my backyard as the sun slipped behind the mountains. One by one, porch lights blinked on down in the valley, tiny stars in the fabric of a town I was finally part of. I thought of the house I left, of Frank's silence, Josh's letter, Kelly's tired eyes, of all the noise I once thought I had to absorb just to survive. But this was mine. This quiet, this space, this life stitched together not from what was taken, but from what I chose to keep. Let them rewrite the story however they needed. I had written my own ending. Stillness didn't mean surrender. It meant I had nothing left to prove.